On page 553, to create a validation rule for a table. Now notice it's for the whole table, not just for one specific field. Number 1 says, and notice it doesn't tell you to open which table, but if you look at the picture, it has seminar offerings opened in, we're going to expand our unassigned objects, and it has our seminar offerings table open in design view. Then it says to show our property sheet, so click on your property sheet, and it wants us to go down to our validation rule right here, and you will write a formula. It is the 4th bullet point under number 1, hours spent. So bracket hours, and notice it pops up, so to avoid errors, it's always smart to do it that way. Hours spent is less than or equal to bracket total hours, and notice that also pops up, so we're going to double click it, and life is grand, fewer mistakes that way, and you want to double check to make sure it looks correct, and yes. So the next bullet point says to put in our validation text. So if this is false, then it will kick an error out for you, and the error will be whatever you type in this validation text. So make sure it's nice, because if somebody gets an error, they're going to be grumpy. So be nice. Hours spent cannot exceed. And make sure you spell everything right, because then they'll say mean things about the database administrator because they're already upset. Alright, so make sure it's correct. Hours spent cannot exceed, and that just lets them know what is wrong. No big deal. Close the property sheet and hit save. And we don't care about this, so we're going to say no, because it takes us too long to test everything. And then we are going to close that table. Excellent, piece of cake. And then we're going to create some custom properties for your database, and this is information that people can see that open your database. On page 554, number 1 says click on File. Make sure that the Info tab is selected, and then look over here on the right hand side, there's a blue line of text that if you slide over it, you see that you can click on it, View and Edit Database Properties. Why they don't have a normal button, I'm not real sure, but anyhow, here's the normal place where you would put in the title of your database, the subject, who you are, and all of this information that would help people find your database that need to. But we're not doing that right now. We're going to the Custom tab. In the name list, you want to scroll down till you get the status, and they're in alphabetical order. Make sure that type is text, and the value is live version. When you click on Add, it puts that into the properties, and that will show when somebody opens up the database. So status, live version, and the type is text. Now we're going to create a new name that's not already in here. We're going to choose production, and notice that that is not here. So we will type production, and the type will be date, and the value will be my birthday a couple of years ago, 2015. Alrighty then, and then hit add, and notice that this is when it went into production, March 3rd, 2015, and the type is date. And then that is all we are going to do with our properties. So say OK. Next, looking on page 557, we're going to create a custom input mask. Now the difference between an input mask and a format, An input mask controls how the data is entered, and a format controls how the data looks, or what the data looks like. So on page 557, we are going to force the data that we put into the customer number field has to have 3 letters and 2 numbers. So if somebody accidentally puts in an extra number or not enough letters, it will not work, and they'll know they did something wrong. So the first thing we want to do is go back to our Bavant Publishing and expand our navigation pane. Right-click Customer and open it in Design View, and collapse our navigation pane. Click in Customer Number. Now, and so you can see I have this weird thing going off my computer and I can't get it out of the way, but this says Customer Number right there, trust me. And we want to go down to the Input Mask field. So see this, Input Mask, and we're going to click in there, and we will type greater than LLL, 3 L's, so 3 capital letters, and 99, 2 numbers. And that's going to force whoever puts something in there to have 3 letters and 2 numbers. Now, on page 558, click on the customer name field. Okay. Now, we want to tell it that people have to put something in there. If they leave it blank, it will not allow them to continue. So to force that to happen, do you see down here in the field properties, allow 0 length? We need to make that say no. And you can select this and type no, you can type the N, or you can just come over here to the down arrow and click. And it just depends on what makes you happy. Now, this will force somebody to put something into the customer name. It's excellent if you're doing online forms. So we will save the changes. And no, we don't want to test it. Now go ahead and leave the table open, because on page 559 we are still working in the same table, so there's no sense closing it. So next thing we want to do, select the customer name field again. Yes, it's still selected. Now we're going to create an indexed property. So an index will make finding customers based on their name more efficient than it would be without the index. It will also improve the efficiency by sorting the customer name, and we're going to tell it to do all that. So we want to click on the index button. So we're going to click on the index button, and you can see the 3 indexes that are automatically made. Now, so that you can see these better, every time you click on, here's an index name amount paid, right? You didn't make that. The computer made it for you. So you're going to make another index. Amount paid, notice we have, it is not a primary key. It is not unique, and we are not ignoring if it's blank, right? And it is also sorted in ascending order. Notice that the computer automatically set it to ascending order. So as long as you don't do anything, that's what it's going to do. Notice when we click in customer number, notice that these properties change. Yes, it's primary. Yes, it's unique, so it's the only one. There can be no doubles. And yes, it can be blank. Okay? And then postal code. Now we're going to create our own. So click right here, and the one we're going to create is called Type Paid. Type Paid. Then click over here in your field name, and it lets you choose the customer field that you're going to use. And in this case, we're going to choose 2. So the first one is going to be customer type. Alright, and that is in ascending order. And then click below it, and that one is going to be amount paid. So it's doing the 2 together, amount paid. Now notice in our index we have this box right here that says no, it's not primary, unique, or nulls. When clicking amount paid, there's nothing there because these two belong to this one. Alright, so you are done with that. And then we want to stay indexed here and customer name, and you want to go down to indexed in your field properties. Click on that and you have several choices. Notice that you can choose no, which is where it was. Yes, duplicates are okay, and yes, no, duplicates are okay. Our duplicates are not acceptable. In this case, yes, we want it indexed, and no, and yes, duplicates are okay. Okay? Yes, we want it indexed. Yes, duplicates are okay. So now check this out. Remember how our index was to begin with? And now slide down here and we have a new one. And that's what you just did down here. Cool? Excellent. Alright. On page, okay, so we're going to go ahead and save that. And then we are going to close the customer table. Excellent. On page 562, we are going to learn how to enable error checking. Now that's the default. It should be there. It's the thing that yells at you when your macros aren't correct and won't work, but it is wise to check it and at least know where to go to check. So File, Options, and then you want to choose Object Designers. Slide down, grab your vertical scroll bar, slide down, and notice Enable Error Checking is selected. You definitely want to keep that selected. And then say OK. Alright, see, so nothing difficult. Now on page 563, we're going to create custom data parse. So it's just like in Word where you can make a quick part, and if you use the same inside address or the same opening to a letter all the time, then you can save as a quick part. It's the same thing here. If you use the same information to create a new table all the time, this is a great way to make it a lot faster so you don't have to create a field, that field, every single time you create a new table. So, page 564. They want us to open up the book rep table. So here's a book rep table in datasheet view. Just double click. Now they want us to select last name, hold your shift key down, and then click on postal code. Now there is another way to do it. Click on the last name, hold your shift key, click on postal code. That selects everything in between. Alright, now I'm going to show you another way because I like to do whatever's faster. If you select last name and grab and drag, that selects them like that also. Okay, so make sure that last name, first name, street, city, state, and postal code are all selected right now. And then you want to go to, make sure you have table tools here and your fields tab here, and then choose more fields. Now at the bottom is save selection as new data type. So we click on that and then we'll put in the name that it says. If you look at page 564, number 2, the second bullet says to call it name dash address. And the description is the third bullet point. Last name, first name, street, city, state, and postal code. Alright, make sure that it's pretty. Capital letters where they need to be. Spellings are right. Okay. Now the category, we do have user defined, but in this case they want it to be a quick start for the category. Then click OK. And it says your template has successfully been saved, and we say OK. And then you close the table. And if it yells at you, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Just say you don't want to save changes to the layout of the table. Now, page 566. We're going to create a database from scratch. So we're going to go really fast because you already know how to do this. And we're going to learn how to turn the database that we're creating right now into a template at the end of this. So, to start, do File and New. Then you want to choose Blank Desktop Database. And then where it has Database 1, the name is going to be Clients and Recruiters. Make sure that you put your last name first, first initial underscore in front. Also, make sure that you navigate to where you're saving everything, which is always the scary part because they have us doing that last instead of first. And I like doing that first. And then never know what's going to happen when you're in a hurry. So, chapter 9, and you're going to call it last name, first initial underscore, and clients and recruiters. Say OK. And then double check, make sure that's in the right place. Then hit create. Now, we already have a table created for us. That's the first thing that's there. And the first thing they want us to do is we're going to type recruiter number here. So click to add. And we are going to choose recruiter number. We're going to choose short text. Recruiter number. Then remember you have to click in the space below. And then click in it a second time to edit the settings. So this is going, field size will be 2. And it needs to be required and unique. Now click to add, but in the bottom area. Now by clicking on the bottom area means that you're not going to get this information here, which we don't want that. We are going to choose our quick start information. So click on more fields from there. Slide down to quick start and notice that name address is there. And this is all the information that you just created and spit it out really fast so that it will save you a ton of time. At the end of that, we want to add a rate field that has a number as a data type. So click to add number, name it rate, and then click in there for it to stick and click again. Okay? The next one is going to be commission. So click on the down arrow. And this one is going to have a currency data type. So click in currency. Name it commission. And you have to click in here so it sticks. And life is grand right there. Now on this one we need to switch to design view. Save the table as a recruiter and then say OK. Then select the number field, which is this one here for rate, and change the field size to single, and that way you will be able to get decimals. Now save and close the table. Alrighty. Now we're going to create a second table. Click on Create. I'm on page 568 at the bottom. Now I'm on page 569 at the top. Click on Table. And we want to click in the Click to Add column. Then we want to use short text. call it client number. Then click in the white space below and click in there again and change the field size to 5. And we want to select required and unique. And then we want to add a client name field. So click here, short text, client name, click in the square below again. Field size is 30 for this. And we do not check required or unique. Then we click on click to add, and we want to click in the box below. Okay, make sure you're in the box below. Now choose more fields, and we get to use our quick start category again. So slide down to name address and click, and voila, so very fast. Now we want to get rid of the right name field or get rid of the last name field, so we're going to right click the last name field, and we can slide down here and hit delete field. Now just so you know, you could also do that up here, however you like to get that done. Now we want to add 2 currency fields at the bottom. One of them is called amount paid, and click here to accept, and then click down below again, currency, and this one is going to be current due. Click to make sure it sticks and save it as client and say OK. All right. Now click on the click to add, click on the down arrow. Now we're going to do something a little different. Turn to page 570. We have done this from the design view before, which I personally prefer to work in the design view, but maybe that's how it used to be. That was the only way you could do it. But look up in relationship. So we're going to go ahead and set the relationship here. We're going to choose next, and from here we want to choose the table recruiter and do next. And from there we want to choose recruiter number, first name, and then last name. And notice I'm double clicking instead of coming over here and clicking on the arrows. That works. Whatever makes you happy. You can do either way. And then from there we are going to sort that by recruiter number. So click here and choose recruiter number. Then choose next. Make sure that hide key column is selected. Then choose next. And the label for our lookup field is recruiter number. And we are going to enable data integrity and say finish. All right. Then we're going to save our table and close it. All right. So we have our clients and recruiters database, and we now have 2 tables in there. And we're going to import information to both of those tables. So the first thing you want to do is click on external data. And then we want to choose text file for import. Make sure you're in the import section, text file, and then browse to where your information is saved for this class. And the first one we're going to import is the recruiter text file. And since we've already created the table, we will append it instead of importing to a new table. And we're going to append it to our recruiter table. Now say OK. Notice that they're all commas here, so yes, delimited characters such as comma, etc. So say next. And once again, comma here. This is not checked because our first row does not contain field names, so choose next. And import to table. Once again, we're making sure we're importing to the right table or recruiter table. Hit finish. No, we're not saving the import steps, and close. And you can see we now have this information. Now notice that we have the plus signs here. That's because we have linked up with the client table. Alright, so go ahead and close that. Now external data again. Go ahead and close your navigation pane, text file. This time we want to get our client text file, so double click client, append to the client table, and say OK. And once again we have commas, and import to our client table and hit finish. Not import, and close. This is all stuff you've done. Double click client. And voila, life is grand. So we shut that down. Now we're going to create a query using our tables. So first thing we want to do is hit create. And we want to do a query design. And we've done this ad nauseum. We've got it down. Client and recruiter tables. Close that. Alrighty, and you might notice something weird here. The book has an error and I need to sit down and figure out how to change the way the book's written, but this will work for what we're doing. Now create tab and then query design, add table, client and recruiter. And let's see, we're from the client table, we're going to add the client number, client name, and recruiter number. And then from the recruiter table, we're going to use first name and last name. First name, last name. And then all we're going to do is save from there. And we're calling that the client dash recruiter query. Say OK and close that query. Okay, so you have now created a query and two tables. Now from that we're going to create forms. So on page 573 we're going to select the client table one time, don't open it, create, and then we want to click on form, and that makes our single form. Then we hit save, and we're going to call this client details and say OK. Then we want to click on the recruiter table and create and form. And notice that now we have our recruiter form. And we're going to save this as recruiter details. And say OK. Alright, go ahead and close those. Now we have two forms and we're going to select some more. So we're going to select the client table, and we want to go to the More Forms, Create More Forms, and we want a data sheet. And there is our data sheet. And we're going to save. And that will be saved as client. Close that. Same thing for recruiter. Create More Forms, data sheet, and save, and leave that as a recruiter also, and then close that. Then we are going to open up our client heading, our client form. Now, our client form, the book has 2 errors, and this one's an easy fix. The book tells us to choose the ID field, and with the macro that they're having us write, that will not work. So let's click on our client number field instead. Then we want to go to our property sheet. And since we just did macros last week, I'm sure you've got this down. Click on the build on click. So whenever we click on this, we want it to open up the full form for the individual client. Okay? So on click, macro builder. Alright. So in this, the book doesn't walk you through it this time, but it does give you information on where to go. So in the last chapter, pages 504 through 507, have this written out step by step if you need help. But it also, on page 574, figure 9-53, has all the code written out for you. So notice that the first thing is set temp var. So we're going to have to set our temporary variable, and that will be a macro command. So we click in macro commands, slide down to set temp var, double click, and our temporary variable for our client number will be CN. And our expression will be bracket client. And notice we have client number right there. Okay? So that is the first part. Then we want to tell it to open up a form when we click on the client number. So since we're opening a form, that is going to be a database object. So expand that and you will see open form. Now we need to tell it what form we want it to open. So when we click on the client number, we want it to open up the client details form. Okay? So our view is form view, and where condition. This right here is what makes it work. When we click on the client number, whatever client number we click on, it will find that client number in the forms and open up that client number. Now since we wrote a temporary variable, we'll use that CN instead of writing out the entire client number. And right now it's more work than it's worth, but if you did this a bunch and you had a ton of code, then it would make life easier. So we're going to use our bracket, client number, notice it's right here, equals, and you can just type temp var. If you are using the double click method like I am, it will actually do the bracket for you. I'm scared to kind of show y'all that because then somebody might forget the double click and forget the brackets and it won't work. So make sure that you put your brackets in there. For the CN, however, you have to put your own brackets. So remember exclamation point, square bracket, and CN, and then close that bracket. Now the data mode for this is going to be read only. They will be able to only see it, and then dialog for the window mode. Then you see from the very bottom, the very last thing they do is remove that temporary variable. So remember, temporary variables, that is a macro command, so go to that section. and double click remove temp var. And if it doesn't work the first time, click again. And since our temporary variable is CN, we will click on or type CN as the temporary variable that's going to be removed. Piece of cake. Now, since we have our error checking on there, we can hit save, and if it's wrong, it will yell at us. And yay, no yelling, so we're going to close. Alright, and then we're going to close the property sheet and close our client table and save. Okay, now we want to do the same thing for our recruiter details. So in this case, we are going to page 575. We are going to create a data sheet form for the recruiter table, and we've already done that. So we will open that, close your navigation form, and this one also is telling us to click on the ID field, but that won't work. We need to click on the recruiter number column. So click on recruiter number to select that. And then we're going to create the macro for that. So property sheet, on click, builder button, macro builder, say OK. And if you look at page 9, figure-954 on page 575, you'll see in that code the first thing we need to do is set our temporary variable. So double click set temp var, and we're going to call this RN, and the expression is going to be recruiter number. So notice that I just started typing. I didn't put my brackets, but since I double clicked, it put them both for me. So if you choose that method, make sure that you do the double click. You have to have the brackets there because there's a space in that field name, and code doesn't work with spaces. Alright, now we want it to open a form, so that is a database object, and we're going to double click open form. The form that we want it to open is recruiter details. So we'll click on the down arrow and slide to recruiter details. We want to view it in form view, and we have to write the same formula but with the recruiter number this time, so that it sees that recruiter number and then it goes to the recruiter details and finds that recruiter number in our forms. Okay, so recruiter number, and you can double click. Notice that it added my brackets for me. Then you want to type an equal sign, and you can type temp vars, and you can double click when it pops up, exclamation point, and you have to put the brackets for the RN. The data mode, click on the down arrow, is read only, and the window mode is going to be dialog. Okay, now we need to remove our temporary variable at the end of that. So close the database objects, macro commands, remove temp var, and it's going to be RN, no brackets. So we save and keep our fingers crossed, and yay, it works. And we close it, close our property sheet, save, and then close our recruiter form. Now expand our navigation pane out. So we now have 4 forms, a query, and 2 tables. Now select the client recruiter query, and we're going to create a data sheet for that one. Create, and we want to do more forms and data sheet. And then we want to save. And it should be Client Recruiter Query is the form name, and say OK. Now, the reason why we did all those data sheets is because we're going to use these forms in our menu that we will create right now. So, page 575, create, and we want to choose a navigation form and choose horizontal tabs. Excellent. Now, we need to save this as main menu. So click up here, type main menu, and you're going to set it so that this is the first thing that opens when somebody opens the database when we're done with it. And for the title, you click in there once, click in again, select it, and instead of navigation form, we want it to be clients and recruiters. Okay, and then click out of that. Now, they want us to grab all of our forms and stick them up here. So grab your client form first, just like we did last time. And then we want the recruiter form, client recruiter query form, client details form, recruiter details form. Cool. So now all you have to do is click on each one individually, and it works great. Okay. And then you want to save and close the form. And for this to work, you also have to close. Oh, wait. Go to File. We need to set it so the menu opens. Go to File, Options, and then we want to choose Current Database and slide down Display Form. Click on the down arrow and choose Main Menu. And that way, as soon as somebody opens up the database, this is the first thing that opens. Say OK. And it tells us you must close and reopen the current database for it to work. Say OK. And then we're going to close it.